Hi, everyone. My name is Abraham Scully, and I am the founder and CEO of Speaks to Inspire and a fellow Active Minds speaker.
Y hola a todos, my name is Fanny Scully, and I am a mental health practitioner and the program manager at Speaks to Inspire.
We are super excited that you're joining us for our presentation, and you are attending the 2022 Active Minds Conference. Let's turn it up. We're ready to dive into our presentation, but before we do that, we want to give you some background as to why both of us are passionate about this conversation, and then we'll get right into our presentation. So I grew up in a Jamaican American household and a Christian household where we didn't have conversations about mental health. We didn't have conversations about our feelings, our emotions, how to get help. And I went through my college years dealing with depression and suffering in silence. And a lot of that was due to stigma. It wasn't until I finally got some professional help from a counselor on campus, was diagnosed with depression and started my journey of recovery, that I realized that it's okay to have conversations about mental health. It's okay to create safe spaces. So I've developed this passion just for eradicating mental health stigma and creating safe spaces for people who look like me to have honest conversations about mental health. So that's what makes me passionate, and that's why I'm here with you all today.
And a little bit about myself, I am a Latina born and raised in Caracas, Venezuela. And even though I grew up around severe mental illness and I have experienced mental illness myself, stigma was very much present in my life. And so that inspired me to pursue a career in mental health and figure out ways that I could support the people I love and encourage them to talk about something that is so much of a big part of a human experience. So over the past 6 years, I became a mental health practitioner and an avid advocate for my community. And I'm super excited today to be talking about some of the things that we experience with Abraham and teaching you some tools that you can implement to support Black and Latinx individuals.
All right, so we hope you're ready to dive into today's presentation, and we're going to get right into it. Today, we're going to be talking about amplifying Black and Latinx voices, unlearning the lies that keep us suffering in silence. One of the big things that individuals in these communities experience as a barrier to opening up about their mental health and even reaching out for resources is stigma. So when it comes to stigma, it's really about understanding what it is so that we can work around stigma and break down some of these barriers. So stigma refers to the negative attitudes that society has about people with mental illness. It can also be the shame that people with mental illness have about their own condition. Another thing about stigma is that when someone is stigmatized, it really makes them feel alone. It makes them feel helpless and hopeless. I just want you to take a second to think about this question. How would it make you feel if you were struggling with your mental health and felt that others thought less of you? You'd probably feel like you would want to isolate yourself. You'd probably feel like you didn't want others to know about what you were dealing with. You probably would feel like treatment wouldn't work for you. And for individuals in the Black and Latinx communities, a lot of them have that same experience. And many times it starts with that stigma that's associated with it.
And so now that we have talked about what is stigma, we want to take a little bit of a deep dive on what stigma can look like in our communities or what it can sound like. So I want you to take a moment right now and reflect on what are some situations or examples in your own life where you may have experienced stigma, or you have somebody that you love that is part of these communities and they have shared with you some of the stigma that they have experienced when it comes to mental health, or they may share with you some statements like the ones that you see in the screen, such things as, I don't need help, I can figure it out by myself, or struggling with my mental health is a sign of weakness, or something that we hear a lot in our Black and Latinx households. What happens in this house stays in this house. Or as my mom would say, la ropa sucia se lava en la casa, which is to say, we don't share our personal things with strangers, right? We don't share our feelings, we don't share our struggles. And so this is one of the issues, some of the things that you can hear about. And then last but not least, you can also hear things like, I can pray depression away, or I can deal with my mental illness by praying or going to church and I'll be fine. And we do want to highlight that spirituality and taking care of our emotional beings and our spiritual beings is an important part of our lives. And it's an important part of mental health recovery. But we do need to be mindful, especially in these communities, that education about the tools that we have is important. And that prayer is not the only thing we can do to take care of ourselves. And so now we want to go a little bit further. Abraham mentioned what are some of the negative effects that stigma can have in these communities, but we also want to highlight some of the other levels in which stigma can have a very negative effect. So stigma can affect our social, economic, and public health experiences as Black and Latinx individuals. And so it's important for us to recognize the harmful effects that stigma has in our community at large, how it affects us individually, how it affects our relationships with others, and how it really affects Black and Latinx individuals in the way they can seek treatment and recover from a mental illness.
So the big question is, how can we amplify Black, Hispanic, and Latinx voices? I think the first thing that we have to recognize is that our stories matter, just like any other story. And then also recognizing that there is power in our stories. Power can break through stigma. Power can create the safe space that we need to have these honest conversations about our mental health. And power can create, mental health awareness. And so a couple of things that we can do and implement today to really help to amplify the voices of Black, Latinx, and Hispanic individuals is, number one, become educated. Become educated on the unique barriers that exist for individuals in these communities, right? We talked about one barrier being stigma, but what are some of the other barriers that we can understand that helps us to be compassionate and empathize with individuals in these communities? The next thing that we can do is to show compassion, right? So it's about, I may not understand your experience 100%, but I have compassion for what you're experiencing. And not only that, but I'm going to validate your experience, even though I may not have the experience myself. And then the last piece is having honest, open, and transparent conversations about mental health. Here at Speaks to Inspire, we like to talk a lot about having hot conversations. And HOT is an acronym that stands for being honest, open, and transparent. And actually what we want to do for you today is we want to share with you an interactive role play on what it looks like to have a hot conversation and how you can implement this in your personal life, in your professional life, and to really build meaningful relationships with others.
And to close off, we just want to invite you to connect with us on all of our social media platforms that are listed on the screen. And again, we want to encourage you to scan the QR code that you see on the screen so you can look at the role play activity, learn some awesome tools, and it's going to direct you to a very short video, or you can just copy and paste the link that you see on the screen. We look forward to hearing from you, connecting, and then just learning your thoughts on our presentation and continuing this conversation. So we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and we thank you so much for hanging with us today.